Hey guys, tonight we wander through whispering gardens, where the scent of jasmine drifts on cool evening air, and water droplets catch the last glow of sunset like liquid gemstones. You probably won't survive this without picturing yourself splashing at every chance. But that's the price of serenity for free. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the threshold of a grand Persian garden, perhaps in Shiraz or Isfahan, where every rustle of leaves seems timed to a hidden rhythm. In medieval Persia, engineers carefully selected water sources, often mountain springs or qanat outlets, whose steady flow promised both life and melody. Mainstream historical fact: qanats, underground aqueducts, tapped into Zoroastrian reverence for pure water, emerged around the first millennium BCE to sustain arid landscapes. Historians still argue whether qanat technology originated in Persia or diffused from earlier Mesopotamian systems, but its legacy in garden design is unmistakable. A fringe tidbit drips from legend: some gardens featured concealed grotto springs, where engineers whispered to water nymphs before excavation, believing the spirits blessed each channel. You probably won't survive borrowing a shamanic tune-up for your backyard, well. So maybe leave those rituals to history's poets. As you approach the low marble threshold, a narrow stone channel, barely an inch deep, carries water in a slender ribbon that glimmers like quicksilver under your sandals. The gentle trickle is a promise: each pool, each fountain will sing to you in subtle notes. You follow the channel a few paces, feeling your footsteps softened by moss that thrives in the cool mist. Joke 1: if gardens could gossip, they'd whisper, "Share, the water's about to drop some beats." Water flows into a shallow basin carved from pink alabaster. Every drop lands with a muted plop, almost like the tick of a metronome. The designers knew that selecting a spring with a precise 7 liters per minute flow would produce a soothing pattern, enough motion to catch your ear but never so loud as to startle your thoughts. Fringe practice anecdotal accounts claim some engineers tested multiple springs at dawn, measuring drip rates with clay cups and palm-lined drums, ensuring each garden's sound signature was unique. You step closer, cupping your hand in the channel to feel the cool current callback unlocked. Remember the hidden grotto's breeze. From opening imagery, this water feels both fresh and ancient, carrying mountain minerals that taste like promise. Massages of water against marble brim inspire hushed awe. Joke 2: if fountains could schedule playlists, they'd have chill drops on repeat. You let your gaze rise to the garden walls, punctuated by niches where smaller spouts once jetted upward in perfect arcs. Even without plumes, the basin's continuous feed hums along as if humming a lullaby. Mainstream historical fact: Persian garden layouts often arranged water features along the central axis, reflecting cosmic order and amplifying sound through symmetry. Historians still argue whether the primary goal was aesthetic harmony or practical cooling, but walking these alleys feels like both. A gentle breeze rustles orange blossoms overhead, their petals occasionally rustling into the basin below. Each blossom's soft plunk adds a random flourish to the garden's melody. You inhale citrus and water, blend into an aromatic lull, promising calm. Joke 3: if blossoms could drop remixes, petals would feature on Fountain Beats Vol. 1. The channel leads you onward to a broader plaza where a larger central pool awaits. But that's for section 2, so carry with you the memory of that first sliver of water, its measured song against marble, and the promise that we've just begun to explore how Persian garden engineers turned springs into symphonies. You step onto a cobbled walkway, bordered by low hedges, and peer down into the narrow grate that reveals the qanats' translucent ribbon of water, dreamlike, hidden, yet utterly present. Qanats are marvels of ancient Persian engineering, gently sloping underground tunnels that tap distant aquifers and channel life-giving water across parched plains into garden sanctuaries. Mainstream historical fact: the qanat system, which dates back to at least the early 1st millennium BCE, allowed engineers to access and transport groundwater over miles, without mechanical pumps, using gravity alone. Historians still argue whether the first qanats appeared in Persia or neighboring regions like northern Arabia, but by the time of the Achaemenids, they were everywhere. A fringe tidbit echoes in your mind. Legend has it that some master builders carried tiny earthen whistles to mimic the qanats' windborne hum during construction, so subterranean spirits would bless the tunnels. You probably won't survive installing spirit whistles in your basement water lines, so let's stick to admiring the ingenuity above. You find a polished stone opening into ground, the vertical shaft, known as the mother well. Narrow steps wind down into cool darkness, each tread echoing with your breath. You lower your hand into the opening and feel the damp breeze rising from the qanat's depth, carrying whispers of distant springs. As you descend, the temperature drops and the scent of moist earth intensifies, a sensory callback to that grotto breeze from section 1. Joke 1: if tunnels could text back, they'd say, "BRB collecting echoes." Reaching the tunnel floor, you crouch and peer along the gently sloping channel. The smooth stone bottom glistens as water flows in a steady sheet, barely a centimeter deep, but enough to sustain entire gardens above. You trudge forward a few paces, your sandals sliding on polished stone, and the water's quiet rush fills your ears like distant rainfall. Fringe practice. Some artisans claimed that dropping a pebble into the qanat at precise intervals allowed them to measure flow speed by ear, an auditory flow meter that required acute hearing. You probably won't survive pebbles in your pipes, so let the springs run untested. Joke 2: if qanats had mood rings, they'd glow blue for peaceful flow. As you wander, the tunnel walls reveal faint tool marks, chisel, and pick remnants of laborious hand carving by teams who tunneled from both ends to meet in the middle. Their precision ensured the slope never exceeded a gentle gradient, typically around Watt 1000, so water never rushed too fast or pooled. Mainstream historical fact: qanat gradients averaged about 1 vertical foot of drop per 1,000 feet of horizontal distance, balancing flow rate and erosion control. Historians still argue how builders maintained such precise slopes over miles without modern surveying equipment, but they mastered sighting along simple water levels and plumb lines. A sudden drip somewhere upstream adds punctuation to the steady run, an unplanned solo that spices the rhythm. You pause, listening as droplets strike the channel and scatter in random taps. Callback unlocked. Remember those engineered drips in section 1's marble basin. Here nature improvises. Joke 3: if water had stage fright, it'd stall before every drip. You reach a junction where a side branch splits off to supply a terrace above. Engineers carefully size these offshoots using smaller tunnels or clay pipes to divert a fraction of the flow to fountains, pools, and irrigation channels. You place your finger in the mainstream and feel the currents tug just enough to pull a single leaf downstream in a leisurely drift. Fringe tidbit: Some clever engineers insert decorative lamplight lanterns along key shafts so that at dusk, descending pilgrims saw dancing lights through grated covers, an early light show synchronized with water's murmur. You probably won't survive rigging your backyard drain for lantern festivals, so admire the spectacle here. Stepping back into the daylight through another grate, you emerge onto the garden terrace, where carved stone channels fan out, like the fingers of a hand, each leading to a fountain basin, flower border, or shady arbor. The Quran's hidden life feeds each feature in perfect harmony. Mainstream historical fact: Persian gardens or charges relied on qanat-fed furrows, called midis, that split into 4 quadrants, symbolizing the 4 Zoroastrian elements of sky, earth, water, and plants. Historians still argue whether the fourfold layout originated from garden symbolism or practical irrigation patterns, but walking these channels, the unity of form and function is undeniable. Joke 4: if gardens could DJ, they'd drop Fountain Beats Part 2 right here. You follow one narrow canal to a rectangular reflecting pool polished by centuries of gentle flow. Its surface is so still you see a perfect mirror of cypress trees and a distant pavilion roof. As you step closer, a faint ripple disturbs the glass, an imperceptible sign that life moves below. Fringe practice: some garden custodians reportedly added aromatic oils like rose or jasmine into the qanats' upstream sections so that the water carried floral scents through every channel, scenting fountains as it passed. You probably won't survive a noseful of concentrated perfume running through your pipes, but here the effect is ethereal. The sun warms your back as you trace the channel's path across the terrace, noting how each grate, each slope, and each junction was carved with both utility and sound in mind. The faint echo of the water's flow, augmented by the tunnel's resonant walls, follows you above ground, uniting hidden depths with surface beauty. You carry the qanats' hush in your ears and beneath your sandals as you step toward the next engineered marvel, the garden's pool layouts that transform mere channels into soundscapes. You glide past a row of slender cypress trees, their trunks reflected in a long central pool that stretches like a sky mirror across the garden's heart. Here, the layout isn't just visual, it's an acoustic composition choreographed so that each pool and pathway carries the water's song in harmonious waves. You probably won't survive noting every echo point, but follow the channels and let your ears guide you. In Persian gardens, the chaharbagh, a 4-part design, divides space into quadrants by watercourses, creating intersecting channels that meet at a central pool. Mainstream historical fact: the chaharbagh layout, inspired by paradise descriptions in the Quran, organized gardens into symmetrical plots around water basins, blending spiritual symbolism with practical irrigation. Historians still argue whether the paradise garden concept or pre-Islamic Persian prototypes influenced the design first, but the result is a seamless blend of geometry and melody. A fringe tidbit drifts on the breeze. Some garden keepers claimed that planting fragrant roses and orange trees at channel junctions tuned fountains like natural tuning forks, releasing scents in rhythm with water's pulses. You probably won't survive botanical acoustics at home, so savor this sensory duet. You step onto a raised marble walkway, flanked by narrow channels on either side. Each channel's width and depth were meticulously measured just wide enough to allow water to flow at approximately 30 centimeters per second, producing a gentle refrain as it cascades over small marble thresholds carved every few feet. You follow one channel's path, feeling its whisper against the stone edges. Callback unlocked the qanats' hidden hum. From Section 2 now emerges in the open air. Joke 1: if pathways could sing, they'd hum. Follow me, water's got the beat. At each channel intersection square, pools capture water's flow before releasing it, with a soft surge into adjoining channels. This pause and release pattern creates an ambient staccato that soothes rather than startles. Mainstream historical fact: Persian garden engineers used staggered pool sizes, smaller catch basins, feeding into larger reservoirs to regulate flow and amplify acoustic depth. Historians still argue how standardized these dimensions were across regions, but the auditory effect is unmistakable. You lean over one pool's edge, peering at its gently rippling surface. As sunlight strikes the water, you see dancing patterns of light and shadow projected onto the mosaic tiles below, another layer of sensory layering. Fringe practice mosaic artists sometimes embedded small metal sheets beneath shallow pools to catch light flashes and create shimmering auditory reflections as water moved. You probably won't survive installing metal chips under your bathtub, so note the artistry here. Joke 2: if pools could DJ, they'd spin kaleidoscope tracks for fish. Between pools, raised plant beds form narrow strips of lush greenery. The bed's edges serve as mini aerators. Water forced through narrow gaps generates tiny bubbles that tickle the air with a soft hiss, like whispered secrets from the garden's soul. Mainstream historical fact: microaeration through constrictions helps oxygenate water and prevent stagnation, a technique ancient engineers discovered through observation. Historians still argue whether these features were intentionally designed for health benefits or emerged from centuries of iterative tweaks, but the result is a living, breathing ecosystem. You close your eyes, letting the rhythmic drip-slide-drip pattern lull your senses. Occasionally, a stray leaf undulates through a narrow channel, adding a soft rustle to the otherwise aquatic concerto. Callback unlocked. Remember floral petals in section 1. Now each petal plunge adds a whimsical solo. Joke 3: if leaves could rap, they'd drop sick beats when tumbling down the riff. Ahead, the central pavilion's columns frame a grand octagonal basin where 8 narrow spouts project water in synchronized arcs, each time by channel slope, to hit the basin's center milliseconds apart, creating an enveloping surround sound effect. Mainstream historical fact fountains like the one at Chehel Sotun in Isfahan employed multiple calibrated jets to produce complex water patterns and sounds for royal audiences. Historians still argue how early engineers achieved precise jet timing without advanced tools, but oral traditions credit skilled artisans with keen intuition and water clocks. You step into the pavilion where each footfall echoes between columns and water jets. The pavilion's dome funnels sound downward, mixing fountain echoes into a soft drone that cradles the space. Fringe, tidbit palace musicians reportedly tuned their instruments to match fountain frequencies, composing garden concerts that blended human melody with water's natural rhythms. You probably won't survive performing a harp recital inside your bathroom, so appreciate this palace-scale performance. Emerging back onto the terrace, you carry the memory of mirrored pools, rhythmic cascades, and architectural echoes. Each step reveals how the Persian garden layout transforms still water and flowing channels into an immersive soundscape, a living composition written in marble tile and moving water. You step through a carved stone arch into a secluded niche, where a polished bronze pump stands half-buried in scented gravel, its curved handle glinting in the dappled light. This is where fountain mechanics come alive, ingenious devices that coax water skyward or coax a steady flow without visible power. You probably won't survive tinkering with ancient pumps in your living room, but it's worth understanding how these early machines set the stage for every majestic jet you've heard so far. Persian engineers employed a variety of mechanisms: siphons, screw pumps, and gravity-fed pistons to power fountains long before steam or electricity. Mainstream historical fact: Heron of Alexandria described the first known Archimedean screw pump in the 1st century CE, and though its origin remains debated, Persian inventors refined similar devices in garden castles by the 10th century. Historians still argue whether these pumps evolved locally or were adaptations of Hellenistic designs, but the Persian versions were noted for their elegance and efficiency. A fringe tidbit gurgles up rumor has it that some palace engineers coated their pump screws in a secret resin infused with goat tallow and rose water, reducing friction while perfuming the water. You probably won't survive perfuming your spaghetti sauce with tallow. So let's leave that trick to palace artisans. You kneel beside the pump, pressing your palm to its cool metal, and hearing a faint hum of anticipation. A cast bronze spout extends from its base, once connected to hidden reservoirs. You grasp the handle and pull it rises smoothly, drawing water from an underground cistern into the pump chamber. Then, with a gentle push, a column of water hisses out through a concealed nozzle, alighting on a shallow marble ledge. Joke 1: if pumps could gossip, they'd boast, "I work out, so your fountains don't have to." Nearby, a siphon arch, 2 copper pipes joined at the top, carries water from a higher pool into a lower chamber without a single moving part. You hear the water rush through the arch like the wind in a cave, its velocity driven purely by pressure differences. Mainstream historical fact: the principle of communicating vessels and siphon action was understood by medieval Islamic engineers, enabling them to create continuous flows between basins at different elevations. Historians still argue how widely siphons were used in rural versus royal gardens, but in major urban oases, they were prized for silent operation. You lean in to listen as water drips through a small hole at the siphon's apex, each splash measured and rhythmic. Callback unlocked. Remember those marble drips in Section 1. Here, each drip is engineered for symmetry and sound. Joke 2: if siphons could tweet, they'd post, "Just slid downhill again." Thrilling stuff. Across the courtyard, you spot a hidden piston pump, the remains of a wooden cylinder and leather valve that once pumped water into a raised reservoir. Though time has worn its wood to a soft patina, you imagine chamber walls expanding and contracting in a steady heartbeat, drawing water up and releasing it in a soft gush. Mainstream historical fact: early piston pumps described in medieval treatises by engineers like Al-Jazari in the 12th century influenced Persian garden hydraulics despite originating elsewhere. Historians still argue whether Persian artisans adopted these designs directly or developed parallel solutions, but the networks of knowledge across the Islamic world are undeniable. You press a finger to the pump's aperture and feel its latent pulse, a reminder that every fountain owes its song to hidden gears and valves. Fringe practice. Some court mechanics added small cogs to regulate pump speed, ensuring a constant drip rate even under variable reservoir levels, a proto-governor mechanism centuries before steam engines. You probably won't survive tinkering with governor cogs on your garden hose, so admire the sophistication here. Joke 3: if valves could sing opera, they'd hit a high C for every drop. Nearby, a stepped cascade reveals another gravity-fed marble water sent over a series of ledges, each carved at a precise angle to produce descending cascades that sing in arpeggios. You watch droplets split from each ledge edge, creating a multi-tiered chorus of splashes. Mainstream historical fact: cascade fountains popular in 16th century Persian palaces relied on precise leveling and notch placement, sometimes varying ledge widths by mere millimeters to tune the waterfall's pitch. Historians still argue how artisans measured these tolerances without modern tools, but oral traditions credit master masons with extraordinary sight and feel. You step closer and dip a finger in the topmost pool, the origin point of the cascade. A quick test confirms the flow is steady, neither too fierce nor too feeble. Callback unlocked the same balance you admired in shallow channel flows. Now animates vertical drops. As you explore, you notice a hidden ball valve, an orange wood sphere, that when rotated, throttles the water feed to each small fountain spout. Engineers would carve the valve with fine grooves to create whistling effects, a playful experiment to add randomness to water music. Fringe tidbit palace pranksters reportedly set these valves to whistle only after dark, surprising night watchers with sudden thrills in the silence. You probably won't survive pranking your family with whistling valves, so keep the surprises in these gardens. You step into a stone archway, where a small nozzle points upward, awaiting water stored in a terracotta urn above. When the urn's level reaches a cutoff valve, water spills over, creating a short-lived jet before the urn drains and pauses. This intermittent fountain uses only gravity and simple valve timing, no pump is required. Mainstream historical fact: intermittent fountains or judo delighted royal guests in Safavid Persia with predictable cycles that synchronized with music and poetry recitals. Historians still argue whether the timing mechanisms used floated balls or siphon triggers, but both variations appear in garden accounts. You watch as the jet sputters to life, an impulsive spit of water that rises a foot high, then ceases, leaving silence for a moment before the next surge. You lean back, letting the unexpected pattern lull you. Callback unlocked, echoing the spontaneous drops from the qanat junction in Section 2, now choreographed above ground. Feeling inspired by these time-worn machines, you realize fountain mechanics aren't just about movement, they're about tempering water's voice, shaping its tempo, and composing soundscapes that ease the mind. Each pump, siphon valve, and cascade plays a role in an orchestrated symphony of tranquility. Next, we'll explore how material choices, stone, marble, bronze, and tile color each note in this watery concerto. You step onto a mosaic platform where the channel widens into a broad basin, its floor paved with alternating bands of black basalt and creamy marble. As water flows across each material in turn, the tone shifts subtly like a fencer's footwork across hard and soft ground. You probably won't survive swapping out your living room linoleum for marble, but here, the material choice becomes instrumental to the garden's sonic palette. Different stones, metals, and woods each produce distinct water voices. Mainstream historical fact: Persian garden architects selected materials not only for durability and aesthetics, but also for their acoustic properties. Marble yields a crisp, clear plink, while porous sandstone delivers a muted wash. Historians still argue whether engineers measured acoustic resonance scientifically or relied on long apprenticeship and artful intuition, but the sonic results speak for themselves. A fringe tidbit echoes through the pool. Rumor claims that some palace caretakers tested carved wooden beams by dribbling water across them to compare warm versus bright sounds, an oral connoisseurship that predates modern sound design. You probably won't survive turning your deck boards into drum kits, so let's admire the mastery here. You lean down and drop a small pebble into the channel. Callback unlocked to Section 2's pebble flow test to hear how the echo differs on each surface. The pebbles plop on basalt, rings with a sharp ping. On marble, it snaps like a tiny bell. On glazed tile, it splashes with a hollow echo. Engineers match stones to fountain functions. High arched jets landed on marble to sing out across courtyards, while gentle cascades traced sandstone slopes for a soothing murmur. Joke 1: if gardens could arrange percussion sections, they'd audition stones like cymbalists. Beyond stone metal accents add crystalline overtones. Bronze spouts polished to mirror shine project water in pinpoints that chime like wind chimes when they land on metal grates below. Mainstream historical fact: metal alloys with higher copper content resist corrosion in water features, and their densities influence the pitch of dripping sounds. Historians still argue how closely medieval metallurgists monitored alloy composition for acoustics versus structural integrity. But surviving texts praise bronze that sings. You crouch to admire a decorative grate made of interlocking bronze rings. Each ring's diameter and thickness were calibrated so that falling water generated a gentle tinkle. Callback unlock this complements the pump's whistling valve. From Section 4 weaving metal tones into the fountain's voice. Joke 2: if grates could sing scales, they'd belt out do re mist on command. Ceramic tile also features prominently glazed surfaces in cobalt blues, and emerald greens line wall-mounted fountains. Their slick finish speeds water flow, producing a silky slide sound that contrasts with the marble's plinks. Mainstream historical fact: glazed earthenware tiles developed in the Islamic world by the 10th century served both decorative and functional roles, sealing surfaces against erosion and shaping water acoustics. Historians still argue how tile artisans balanced glazes for waterproofing versus sonic brightness, but the result is a melodic wash. You trace the pool's edge, feeling the cool smoothness under your fingertips. A narrow strip of unglazed terracotta interrupts the glaze band. Its rough texture creates a subtle hiss as water passes. Fringe practice: some caretakers mixed fine sand into terracotta slip to produce a frosted hiss effect, a secret recipe whispered among master tilers. You probably won't survive gritty bathtub rails, so keep this trick confined to historic gardens. Joke 3: if tiles could tweet, they'd exclaim, just slid again, smooth move. Wood plays a softer note where canals pass beneath wooden pergolas. Cypress planks prize for rot resistance hum with a low warm thrum as water flows over submerged beams. Mainstream historical fact: Cypress cupressus sempervirens was commonly used in Persian gardens for its aromatic oils and durability. Its density and grain pattern produce a mellow resonance when wetted. Historians still argue whether the wood was valued more for scent or sound, but walking through these shaded galleries you feel the synergy. You step onto a timber drawbridge lined with narrow slits that channel water beneath, creating a soft rolling rumble. Callback unlocked, echoing the cascade tears from Section 4, now timber inflected. The rumble vibrates through your feet, grounding you in the garden's heartbeat. Between materials, boundary strips of lead, a malleable metal, were sometimes embedded along channel edges to dampen unwanted overtones, smoothing transitions between stone and tile. Fringe tidbit: late career engineers allegedly experimented with gold leaf inlays at drip points, hoping precious metal would add a shimmering overtone. Though critics sneered at gilded acoustics, you probably won't survive lining your sink with gold foil. So let this be a palace luxury. Joke 4: if gold regrets existed, this use would be humming, why me? As you wander, you hear how each surface's texture, density, and shape coalesce into a layered soundscape. Materials are instruments. Water is the score. Combining marble clarity bronze chimes, tile, wash, wood thrum, and stone pinks, Persian garden engineers, composed living symphonies that comfort the mind and cradle the soul. Hold on to the memory of that mosaic basin's shifting tones underfoot, its interplay of basalt and marble, because next we'll explore how pool ripples magnify these material voices into resonant delights across the garden. You step onto a gently sloping lawn, where a rectangular pool hugs the earth like a tranquil mirror. Its shallow depth, barely 10 centimeters at the edges, ensures that every breeze, every tossed pebble, and every distant drip resonates as ripples across the polished surface. You probably won't survive tossing stones into your bathtub and marveling at each wave, but here, ripple design was a deliberate art form. Garden engineers discovered that shallow pools amplify surface ripples into soothing low-frequency hums. Mainstream historical fact studies of water acoustics show that wave speed and frequency in shallow basins create audible rhythms with longer wavelengths, producing deeper recessive sounds. Historians still argue whether Persian designers measured exact depth for optimal resonance or refined them through hands-on trials, but their empirical success is clear. A fringe tidbit floats on the misty breeze. Some caretakers claimed that adding a pinch of powdered marble dust to shallow pool beds smoothed micro-imperfections, producing silkier ripple tones. An artisanal secret whispered only to royal auditors. You probably won't survive marble-dusted fish tanks, so let this trick remain in palace vaults. You kneel at the pool's edge and gently flick your fingertip against the water, generating concentric circles that race outward. The ripples pass over contrasting tile patterns, glazed cobalt bands alternating with matte terracotta, and each band subtly alters the wave's pitch. Callback unlocked. Remember how materials colored each drop's tone in Section 5. Now waves carry that chromatic signature across the pool. Joke 1: if ripples could rap, they'd drop beat bars faster than you can say splash. Engineers designed shallow gradients so that ripples would refract off gently sloping walls, creating echoing pulses rather than destructive reflections. You dip a pebble into the center and watch as the circular waves morph into ellipses, their overlapping patterns, forming a hypnotic Chantney effect in sound. Mainstream historical fact: Chladni's patterns, nodal shapes formed by vibrations, weren't formally studied until the 18th century, but garden builders intuitively harnessed similar principles for aquatic acoustics. Historians still argue whether this was serendipity or an unrecorded tradition, but the effect feels scientifically profound. Joke 2: if pools could choreograph dances, they teach ripple tango to water itself. Small inlets deliver intermittent drips into the pool's center, each drop timed by upstream valves or siphons to drop at intervals of about 1 second, creating an ambient metronome. You listen as the drip-ripple-drip cycle unfolds, a slow heartbeat for the garden's soul. Callback unlock this pulse. Echoes the fountain jet's intermittent gushes from Section 4. Fringe practice. Some head gardeners reportedly installed tiny hollow bamboo tubes in the pool bed that released microbursts of air, generating delicate bubble patterns that danced with water ripples and early oxygen spa and sonic experiment combined. You probably won't survive bamboo bubblers in your aquarium, so let that exotic feature stay here. Joke 3: if bubbles could sing, they'd harmonize with ripples for aquatic karaoke. As the afternoon sun tilts, you notice how ripples catch the light differently. Across the pool's mosaic, each wave crest casting transient rainbows on the pool floor. The visual sparkle pairs with the mellow acoustic hum, creating a multisensory lullaby. Mainstream historical fact, Persian garden designers understood that combining visual and oral stimuli deepens relaxation, a principle echoed centuries later in modern spa design. Historians still argue how consciously ancient artisans applied multisensory theory versus learning through observation. But the immersive effect is undeniable. You rise, letting the memory of those concentric ripples echoing dips and shifting hues wash through you. Hold on to that sensory watercolor, its pattern will follow you as we delve next into how architectural forms like iwans and domes transform these water melodies into resonant amphitheaters. You slip beneath a lofty iwan, a vaulted archway opening onto the garden, and pause as water's whispers swell into soft oohs and ahs. The iwan's curved ceiling and recessed niches turn the fountain's gentle torrent into an enveloping chorus. You probably won't survive building an arch in your living room, but let's revel in how these halls tuned water into song. An iwan's semi-dome shape concentrates sound waves, much like a whispering gallery. Mainstream historical fact architects of the Seljuk and Safavid eras employed convex vaults and concave niches to enhance acoustic resonance, amplifying voices and water's murmur for ceremonial grandeur. Historians still argue whether acoustics drove Iwan design or emerged as a fortuitous byproduct, but strolling these chambers, the effect feels intentional. A fringe tidbit tiptoes through the echo. Some court musicians timed poetry recitals, so each verse's final syllable coincided with the fountain spout's peak jet, creating a call and response between the human voice and water. You probably won't survive reciting sonnets in your shower to replicate this, so let's savor the palace's orchestrated artistry. You step into the Iwan's cool shade, the stone vault arching high above like a drawn bow. At your center, a low marble trough gathers water from hidden spouts in the recesses, each spout angled to send droplets arcing across the hall and landing with hushed applause. As droplets strike the stone basin, their echoes ricochet across the vault, layering into a cathedral-like reverberation that cradles you in gentle sound. Joke 1: if arches could applaud, they'd sparkle with every drip. Along the Iwan's side walls, petal-shaped niches capture stray splashes, their concave forms amplifying single drops into resonant notes like tiny choral stalls for water's performance. Mainstream historical fact niche acoustics were studied in medieval madrasas, where architects noted how concave cavities focus and enrich ambient sounds. Historians still argue how systematically this knowledge was applied in garden architecture, but here, each niche feels like a crafted resonator. You move closer to a corner niche, placing your ear near the carved stone gouge, designed to catch drips. The isolated echo rings like a distant bell, its decay lingering in the hush. Callback unlocked a single drip's echo in Section 2, now blossoms into layered soundscapes beneath the Iwan's vault. Joke 2: if niches could narrate dramas, they'd whisper Shakespearean soliloquies between drips. Looking skyward, you notice the Iwan's mukarnas, stalactite-like carvings dappled in the lantern light. Each cell's geometry scatters sound, subtly preventing harsh echoes, while enriching the overall tone with gentle modulation. Mainstream historical fact mukarnas ceilings, beyond their visual splendor, were recognized for diffusing sound evenly, creating balanced acoustics in palaces and mosques. Historians still argue whether their primary purpose was structural, decorative, or acoustic, but standing beneath one, you sense all three. A fringe practice emerges in your mind. Some palace engineers embedded thin sheets of metal behind mukarnas clusters to catch water's resonance and channel it back into the hall, a secret echo amplifier hidden behind the beauty. You probably won't survive embedding metal in your ceiling, so let this palace magic remain undiscovered. Joke 3. If muqarnas could sparkle with sound, they'd chime with every note. As you exit the Iwan, the water's echo diminishes into the garden breeze. But the memory of vaulted resonance lingers like a gentle hum in your mind. Carry this echo the way architecture can shape water's song as we wander next into symbolic meanings woven into every tinkling note. You wander beneath a canopy of orange blossoms toward a sunlit plaza where water's melody takes on a deeper meaning, where each drip and droplet embodies poetic and sacred symbolism. You probably won't survive overthinking every splash, but here, meanings flow as freely as the fountains themselves. In Persian, thought water symbolized life purity and divine mercy. Fountains whispered the promise of paradise on earth. Mainstream historical fact. Persian garden design inspired by Quranic paradise. Descriptions imbued water features with spiritual resonance, reflecting the believer's gardens beneath which rivers flow. Historians still argue whether the Quranic imagery drove garden layouts or pre-Islamic Zoroastrian motifs influenced them first, but water's sacred soundscape unites both traditions. A fringe tidbit ripples through legend. Some mystical poets believed certain fountains captured angelic hymns, their water tuned by unseen hands to sing celestial verses at dawn's first light. You probably won't survive recording angelic hymns in your backyard, so let's carry the metaphorical wonder instead. You approach a central pool framed by 4 arched alcoves, each alcove's water jet aligned with the cardinal directions. North's spout offers deep solemn tones. East's sings bright hopeful notes. South's hums warm comforting hues. West's murmurs a gentle farewell. The arrangement echoes Zoroastrian reverence for the 4 corners of the world, and later Islamic symbolism of heaven's gates. Callback unlocked the Shahar box quadrants from Section 3 now resonate with directional purpose. Joke 1. If fountains had GPS, they'd say, recalculating route to paradise. Nearby, carved inscriptions in elegant Nastaliq script adorn the basin, poetic verses praising water's song. You lean in to read a line, honoring water's tongue that speaks the soul's longing. Mainstream historical fact. Many Safavid-era gardens featured calligraphic panels describing water's virtues, blending literary art with hydraulic marbles. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions were commissioned by poets or penned by court literati, but they reinforce water's sacred voice. A fringe practice emerged. Some court librarians fingered mystical verses onto pump casings, so that each turn of the handle released both water and whispered poetry, an early talking fountain. You probably won't survive ghostly recitations from your taps, so let this remain an enchanting rumor. Joke 2. If inscriptions could talk, they'd recite sonnets at every drip. Continuing, you find a secluded alcove where a tomb-like pool lies beneath a mirrored ceiling. Here, fountain sounds reflect upward and return, symbolizing the soul's ascent to the heavens. The mirrored reflection doubles every droplet's echo, creating a fleeting sense of infinity. Mainstream historical fact. Mirrored pools, known as Iban-i-Chisil cotton in some contexts, were designed to amplify reflections, both visual and oral, evoking celestial expanses. Historians still argue how these mirror effects influence Sufi mystical practices, but the sensory immersion is undeniable. A final fringe tidbit. Some garden mystics claimed that gazing into these mirrored pools at twilight allowed one to hear one's future whispered among the ripples, a sonic divination ritual Lost to time. You probably won't survive awaiting whispers of doom or destiny, so let the waters keep their secrets. As you step away, water's symbolic song trails you a reminder that in every pattern and plink lies layered meaning, binding earth, sky, body, and soul. Carry this depth of symbol as we explore next the caretaking rituals that maintain these sacred soundscapes. You slip through a narrow service passage, hidden behind a rose-arched alcove, and enter the garden's backstage, a tidy courtyard where caretakers tend to the fountain's every whisper. Buckets of fresh spring water line low benches. Reed shears glint against carved stone, and soft footfalls on gravel echo in anticipation of ritual. You probably won't survive treating your bathroom like a palace maintenance hub. But here, daily care is part of the performance. Each morning, gardeners perform the water blessing, rinsing channels and spouts with fresh Pagina spring water to clear debris and renew mineral purity. Mainstream historical fact palace records from the 16th century note that Safavid custodians flushed fountains daily at dawn to prevent algae buildup and sediment clogging. Historians still argue whether this was strictly practical or also a ceremonial homage to water's sacred role. But the routine cemented the garden's living pulse. Fringe tidbit murmurs among the caretakers. Some believe that speaking kind words to the water channels, gently calling them friend or guide, enhanced flow and combated malevolent water jinn. You probably won't survive conversing with your garden hose, so let's keep the goodwill poetic. Knives of polished bamboo trim overgrown reeds and floating weeds from basin edges. With swift practice snips, gardeners harvest the slender blades. Callback unlocked. Remember the reeds that flavored Kile tea in Section 9, ensuring channels remain clear and acoustically pure. Joke 1: if reeds could applaud, they'd cheer after every precise snip. Next, brass nozzles are unscrewed and soaked in a mild vinegar solution to dissolve mineral and crustaceans. The sweet metallic scent drifts through the courtyard, reminding you of bronze spouts humming in Section 5. Mainstream historical fact acid cleaning of metal fountains was recommended in medieval treatises to preserve nozzle geometry and maintain jet precision. Historians still argue how widely vinegar was used versus more abrasive methods like sand scrubbing, but chemical gentleness prevailed in palaces. You lean over a basin to rescue a lone fallen petal trapped in a spout's mesh. Carefully, you lift it out with tweezers. A callback to Section 1's orange blossoms and drop it onto a stone bench for compost. Fringe practice. Some caretakers dried these petals and brewed them into fountain tea, a cooling beverage believed to purify the caretaker's spirit. You probably won't survive tea made of chipped petals, so admire the folklore instead. Joke 2: if petals could file complaints, they demand proper composting. As the midday sun warms the courtyard, a senior gardener sprinkles fine clay powder into each channel, an ancient trick to bind suspended silt into collectible flakes. You watch the water turn milky, then swirl clear again as suspended particles settle. Mainstream historical fact: clay flocculation was noted by water engineers in medieval Islamic texts as an effective way to clarify fountains and irrigation water. Historians still argue whether plant-based coagulants like crushed seed husks were more common than clay, but both methods ensured crystal-clear flow. Around the fountain bases, caretakers perform the reed plug ritual. They remove and replant cut reeds in marsh beds within the garden, allowing new growth to be recycled back into channels. This cyclical care honors the garden's living systems. Callback unlocked. The permaculture echoes from Section 14 now surface in these ancient practices. Joke 3: if reeds could mentor newcomers, they'd teach grow again, my friend. Finally, after scrubbing stone basins with soft camel hairbrushes, gardeners gather at dusk. For the Whispering Rain, a circle ceremony where each places a finger on the basin's edge and shares one word of gratitude to the water. Historians still argue whether this ritual was a communal prayer or a pragmatic acoustics test, each finger's touch checked for unintended vibrations. But the caretakers swear it strengthens the garden's harmony. As you slip back into the main garden, water's serene song follows you well-tuned, well-loved, and well-guarded by hands that treat each drip as precious. Carry this devotion forward as we explore, next, how seasonal shifts transform the fountain's realms of sound. You return to the garden as autumn's cool dusk settles, finding the fountains transformed by seasonal rhythms. Some channels whisper softer pools, shimmer with fallen leaves, and cooling air alters water's every note. You probably won't survive chasing every seasonal shift, but let's hear how spring's torrent and summer's trickle give way to autumn's hush and winter's stillness. In spring, melting snows swell qanat flows, filling channels rapidly and turning measured drips into a lively pattern. By contrast, summer's heat sees water conserved into gentler streams, careful rationing to match waning spring reserves. Mainstream historical fact garden manuals from the 17th century reference high-flow ceremonies in early spring, when water was most abundant, followed by slow-flow adjustments in midsummer to protect sources. Historians still argue whether these rites prioritized ritual spectacle or water management, but both motives intertwined in practice. A fringe tidbit drifts: some hydraulic keepers planted special flow-tuning willows near qanat heads, believing their roots would subtly regulate spring surges by absorbing excess water. You probably won't survive willow wrangling in your backyard, so note this arboreal experiment in hydraulic ecology. As you wander, you notice bronze spouts replaced in colder months with narrower apertures. To reduce freezing risk, callback unlocked to Section 5's material voices, now tweaked for temperature. The winter jets hiss through pin-thin streams that land with a crystalline tinkle, evoking icicle's song rather than summer's lush gush. Joke 1: if fountains had wardrobes, they'd swap their nozzles for sweaters in winter. In mid-autumn, falling leaves drift into shallow pools, adding random plunks to the sonic tapestry. Gardeners deliberately prune overhanging trees to balance leaf fall and keep soundscapes clear, yet embrace some randomness for poetic texture. Mainstream historical fact Persian garden guides advise: embrace autumn's patter as part of seasonal appreciation, valuing natural unpredictability alongside engineered precision. Historians still argue whether leaf management was choreographed or laissez-faire, but the resulting melody feels both controlled and organic. You crouch by a pool where a single maple leaf rides a microcurrent in circles, its edges scraping tile. In a soft, syncopated hiss, another layer of autumn's composition. Callback unlocked reminiscent of Section 6's bamboo bubblers. Nature improvises its own instruments. Joke 2: if leaves could audition, they'd snag the percussion spot for sure. Winter's approach demands more drastic measures. Caretakers drain select channels, preventing ice damage and mural glaze spalling. In some gardens, shallow channels are converted to ice trays for festive games, a callback to Section 4's gravity-fed jets turn intermittent fountains, transforming pools into communal ice founts. Mainstream historical fact: Safavid winter festivals included ice sculptures carved from pool surfaces celebrating water's frozen beauty. Historians still argue how widespread such winter uses were beyond royal courts. But local villages remember annual ice carving contests. You sip warm munya tea from a nearby pavilion, soothing warmth amid the chill, and listen as hydro-tuned channels adjust to near stasis, their faint hums like distant heartbeats. Fringe practice a few caretakers embedded hot coals under select grades to create steam-infused acoustics, tiny hissing vents among ice channels for an ephemeral winter solstice concert. You probably won't survive hot coal grates at home, so savor this fleeting palace luxury. Joke 3. If fountains could wear scarves, they'd wrap their nozzles tight. Finally, as dawn breaks on the garden's first frost, water's voice returns to a pure trickle callback unlocked, reminiscent of Section 1's opening basin, distilled to its essence. Seasonal cycles remind you that the garden's symphony is alive and ever-evolving. Carry these seasonal shifts in mind as we next explore nighttime illumination, where lantern light and water whispers weave nocturnal dreams. You slip through a velvet-draped archway as dusk deepens, lantern light flickering across mosaics and casting dancing shadows on the water's surface. At night, fountains shift from bright day songs to hushed, intimate whispers. You probably won't survive trying to outshine these gentle murmurs with modern speakers. But let's wander through lantern-lit soundscapes anyway. Lanterns hung on slender poles and woven into trellis vines illuminate water channels in warm pools of light, accentuating each droplet's path. Mainstream historical fact: Persian garden caretakers used brass and copper lanterns filled with olive oil to extend garden use into the night, knowing light and water together create a magical ambience. Historians still argue whether lantern placement followed strict geometric grids or intuitive design, but the resulting interplay of flame and flow is mesmerizing. A fringe tidbit: glows some moonlit gardens employed phosphorescent plaster in shallow pools, made from crushed seashells and lime, to cast an otherworldly glow under torchlight. You probably won't survive phosphorescent bathtubs at home, so let this secret sparkle courtside. You pause at a small pool ringed with brass nozzles that catch lantern reflections before sending water arcing into the light. Each jet becomes a glittering arc, its landing a cascade of sparkles. Callback unlocked valves and jets from Section 4 now dance in the firelight. Joke 1: if fountains could disco, they'd light up every droplet. Overhead, paper lanterns scented with rosewater drift on subtle breezes, their scent mingling with water mists. As petals fall into lit channels, each petal's plop produces a soft, echoing tone, shaped by light and shadow. Mainstream historical fact: scented lanterns became popular in Safavid gardens to engage multiple senses, sight, scent, and sound in a unified nocturnal ritual. Historians still argue whether scent or sound held primacy in these ceremonies, but night gardens embraced both. You follow a narrow canal crowned with fairy-like lanterns to a semicircular reflecting pool under a pavilion. The pool's still surface mirrors the lanterns in perfect symmetry, and when a hand disturbs the water, ripples carry down the channel like a gentle lullaby. Fringe practice caretakers sometimes timed lantern placement to match rippling patterns, creating moving mosaics of light on water. You probably won't survive choreographing your smart bulbs to ripple, so relish the palace perfection. Joke 2: if reflections could wing, they'd flirt with your eyes. In a secluded corner, a hidden basin warms gently from an underground brazier, an incandescent fountain whose steam wraps around lantern light like glowing mist. The result is a soft hiss, punctuated by water's drip, creating a dreamlike sonic haze. Mainstream historical fact: Safavid engineers sometimes installed low-heat hearths beneath select pools for winter festivals, enhancing both warmth and nighttime spectacle. Historians still argue how widespread these hearth-fed pools were beyond royal courts, but local lore preserves their memory. You lean in, letting the steam-kissed waters hush lull you. Callback unlocked seasonal steam features from Section 10's winter luxuries return in a warm embrace. Joke 3. If steam could serenade, it would croon lullabies in the dark. As lanterns dim after midnight, the garden's water song softens to near silence. A few distant drips, a sigh of warm stone. A final echo of gurgling channels. You carry this nocturnal hush with you, a promise that water's melody never truly sleeps. You tread a marble causeway, flanked by twin gardens, one belonging to the Shah of Isfahan, the other to his rival prince across the river, and immediately sense a playful rivalry in every fountain's note. Engineers and patrons vie to outdo one another in water music, commissioning ever more elaborate soundscapes. You probably won't survive staging your own fountain-off in the backyard, but let's eavesdrop on how royal pride shaped these watery symphonies. In the 17th century, Safavid Shahs lavishly funded garden waterworks, each palace boasting fountains with higher jets, finer nozzles and more resonant channels than their neighbors. Mainstream historical fact travelers' accounts, like those of Jean Chardin, describe Isfahan's Chehel Sotun Pavilion, featuring dozens of fountains, whose synchronized jets were engineered to impress visiting dignitaries. Historians still argue whether such arrangements prioritized aesthetic spectacle or practical cooling for summer receptions, but the competitive spirit spurred remarkable innovations. Fringe tidbit ripples across palace gossip. Some courtiers wagered on which garden's fountains would be heard first at dawn, placing bets on bird calls versus jet whistles. You probably won't survive betting on your sprinkler system's ppm pools per minute. So let's admire the high-stakes game played by sultans and spies. You stand at the causeway's midpoint listening as the Shah's fountain, its multiple bronze spouts calibrated to drip in a 5/7 polyrhythm, answers the prince's rival installation with a cascade that tumbles over stepped basins in perfect syncopation. It's like two dancers trading steps across the water. Callback unlocked. Remember the cascading arpeggios from Section 4. Here they duel in daylight. Joke 1. If fountains could smack talk, they'd brag. My Splash is your riff's remix. Each court employed master hydraulic architects who guarded their blueprints like state secrets. They tested water clarity pressure and drip rates in secret night trials under torchlight, ensuring no rival could replicate their signature sound. Mainstream historical fact travelogues note that Safavid engineers sometimes spied on each other's gardens under the cover of darkness, sketching channel layouts by lantern light. Historians still argue how often espionage influenced fountain design versus friendly rivalry, but these tales add intrigue to every ripple. Joke 2. If secret plants could leak, they'd drip like underground springs. At midday, you cross to the prince's garden, where a hidden Ewan amplifies a single central jet into a rolling echo, a sonic signature he claimed could top any 20-jet extravaganza. You pause beneath the vault, feeling water's chant pulse in the stone overhead. Fringe practice rumor has it that the prince once had a foreign engineer tune his fountain's voice to mimic a lapidary saw, an odd mill song effect, meant to startle grooms and amuse guests. You probably won't survive commissioning a fountain that sounds like your neighbor's power tools, so appreciate the eccentricity here. Joke 3. If fountains could imitate, they'd audition for the next reality show, Splash Off. Back on the Shah's side, a delicate sunken canal carries water beneath a rose-scented pavilion, the channel lined with thin aluminum discs that ping as water flows, an early percussion ensemble hidden beneath your feet. You step lightly over the channel and hear the metallic tinkle. Mainstream historical fact, alloys like zinc and tin were occasionally used in decorative fountain elements for their distinctive timbre and resistance to corrosion. Historians still argue whether these metals were locally smelted or imported along Silk Road trade routes, but their sound marks elite exclusivity. You recall the bronze chimes from Section 5, callback unlocked, and hear their echoes here amidst the aluminum's bright counterpoint. The garden's acoustic layering rivals any orchestral suite. Later at dusk, the two courts host joint fireline receptions on a floating gallery between their gardens. Lantern-lit barges drift atop the shared canal, and fountains on either bank respond to each other's cues. One side's jets pause, as the others begin creating a cross-garden conversation in water. Mainstream historical fact. Safavid festivities often featured synchronized water and fire spectacles, blending fountains with fireworks for royal audiences. Historians still argue how much of this was choreographed versus improvised. But traveler journals glow with accounts of dancing fountains and water fireworks. You settle into a cushioned barge tea in hand as the fountains converse in drops and sprays. The gardens merge into one grand amphitheater of water, echoing the unity that competition secretly fostered. Fringe legend says that the Shah and Prince once commissioned a joint fountain too complex to maintain, so intricate that caretakers resign en masse, unable to master its cogs and valves. You probably won't survive that level of over-engineering in your patio. So let's toast to balance between ambition and harmony. Joke 4. If fountains could unionize, they'd demand simpler blueprints. As the final jets swoosh in twilight choreography, you carry the memory of regal rivalry and cooperative spectacle fountains as instruments of power, pride, and poetic harmony. Next, we'll see how garden landscapes weave in wind chimes and birdsong to complete the sonic tapestry. You meander through a lavender-lined walkway, where the garden's aquatic chorus blends seamlessly with avian arias and metallic chimes. Beyond fountains, Persian garden designers wove in wind chimes, tiny bronze bells hung from cypress boughs that sang with each breeze, intertwining bird calls and water's murmur into living soundscapes. You probably won't survive hanging dozens of bells in your backyard, but here each note adds depth to nature's orchestra. In many gardens, cedar and cypress groves attracted nightingales and bulbuls, whose dawn songs preceded first fountain drips, while wind chimes sustained mid-morning lullabies on still days. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval Persian texts note the deliberate planting of fragrant trees and bird-friendly shrubs alongside water channels to enhance multi-sensory experiences. Historians still argue whether these plantings prioritize scent, shade, or sound, but birds and bells undeniably enriched garden atmospheres. A fringe tidbit flits by: some caretakers tuned chime sizes to match local bird species' vocal ranges, hoping to harmonize human-made tones with avian melodies. You probably won't survive designing chimes for every stray sparrow at home, so delight in the palace's detailed ear. You step beneath a trellis hung with flat bronze discs that twirl above a canal. Each disc catches sunlight and wind clinking softly, a percussive counterpoint to water's flow below. Callback unlocked the bronze great pings from Section 5 now echo in the breeze. Joke 1. If chimes could pay rent, they'd live in every tree branch. Nearby, a wooden aviary houses trained bulbul songsters released each morning to sing above a central fountain. Their practiced melodies carefully taught by royal falconers spiral upward, merging with water jets in synchronized duets. Mainstream historical fact: bird training manuals from the Safavid era detail methods for coaxing nightingales into melodious patterns, reflecting an aristocratic fascination with Biberia. Historians still argue how widely such training spread beyond royal courts, but garden guests marveled at feathered choristers. Joke 2: if birds could take selfies, they'd pose atop fountain jets, walking on you past slender bamboo tubes tied between pomegranate trees, each tube pocked with holes that gurgle as wind and water pressure combine. These hydrochimes released liquid scapes that twinkled like wind chimes, yet required no breeze, only water's flow. Fringe practice palace engineers sometimes varied hole diameters seasonally to tune hydrochimes to match migrating bird songs. You probably won't survive bamboo water features in your shower, so let this exotic duet inspire garden dreams. Joke 3: if hydrochimes could gossip, they'd whisper, "No wind, no problem." In a shaded corner, you find a stone echo chamber, shaped like a half-shell where water drips into a shallow pool at the chamber's apex. Beneath, a bed of polished pebbles amplifies each drop into a bass-like thrum. Above, hanging bronze bells chime as ripples rise, creating a harmonic interplay of high and low. Callback unlocked the echoing niches of Section 7, now resonate with layered textures. An enclave of fruit trees surrounds this chamber, orange pomegranate and fig whose rustling leaves and occasional fruit plop into nearby streams. Their irregular cadences punctuate fountain rhythms with the garden's native percussion. Mainstream historical fact fruit tree placements were documented as part of Persian garden planning to encourage natural sound varied by season and harvest. Historians still argue whether orchards were for shade, scent, or sound, but their rustle remains a vital voice. You pause to listen, waters hush, bells chime, birds trill, leaves rustle, all converge into a living fugue. Nature and nurture merge, and the garden becomes a symphony of elements. You step into a contemporary courtyard in Tehran, where sleek stainless steel channels cut through polished concrete carrying water flows calibrated to replicate ancient Persian echoes. Designers in this modern revival draw directly from historic blueprints, tuning depth, angles, and materials to resurrect centuries-old soundscapes in new contexts. You probably won't survive turning every municipal fountain into a sonic museum. But here, innovation bridges past and present. Modern sound artists study original palace plans, now digitized to model water velocities and chamber geometries. Mainstream historical fact: recent archaeological projects have uncovered detailed hydraulic drawings in Safavid archives, enabling precise reconstructions of fountain layouts. Historians still argue whether these drawings were meant primarily for maintenance or ritual secrecy, but today's engineers treat them as musical scores. Fringe tidbit: hums. Among revivalists, some audio architects embed tiny underwater speakers in historic pools to enhance natural acoustics, blending original water sounds with subtle electronic harmonics. You probably won't survive adding speakers to your backyard pond, so let this digital-analog fusion inspire imagination. You crouch by a narrow channel, lined with sheets of polished aluminum callback unlocked to Section 5's material voices, then trigger a smooth, variable pump that modulates flow rate to create a pulsing breath effect. The water's hiss swells and ebbs like ocean waves confined in a garden's edge. Fringe practice: a few avant-garde artists pair these pulses with low-frequency subwoofers buried in the channel bed. producing vibrations you feel underfoot, as much as hear echoing underground qanat hums. Mainstream historical fact: seismic studies affirm that water's movement in shallow channels generates low-frequency infrasound, which can affect mood and perception even below audible thresholds. Historians still argue whether ancient engineers noticed these subtle vibrations, but modern revivals exploit them deliberately. Joke 1: if fountains could DJ, they'd drop bass lines straight from the qanat waves. Beyond metallic channels, you find a granite amphitheater, a callback to Section 7's Ewans, where a tiered fountain performs a program sequence each evening. LEDs trace water arcs in color-coded light, while the flow shifts from drips to cascades in a 12-minute sound journey. Patrons recline on steps. Headphones are optional, immersing in the water's rhythmic narrative. Mainstream historical fact: interactive water features have grown popular in urban design, with some installations using real-time flow sensors to adjust jets for crowd noise levels. Historians still argue whether such participatory fountains honor tradition or commodify cultural heritage. But the experience is undeniably captivating. Joke 2: if fountains had playlists, this one's called qanat Chillwave. In a nearby gallery, you examine scale models of historic gardens outfitted with virtual reality fountains. Slip on an AR headset, and you hear the exact echo of tiled alcoves from Shah Abbas's pavilions, complete with bird songs sourced from field recordings of Isfahan's nightingales. Fringe tidbit: experimental sound labs are mapping LiDAR scans of garden vaults to computationally recreate acoustic signatures, sometimes overlaying hypothetical angelic hymns rumored in palace legends. Mainstream historical fact: acoustic archaeologists use 3D modeling and convolution reverb to simulate ancient spaces, validating textual accounts of fountains as performance venues. Historians still argue how accurately digital models can capture variable factors: temperature, humidity, water, purity, but VR tours offer unprecedented immersion. Joke 3: if you could teleport to history, you'd land in a sound wave. As twilight falls, you join a workshop where students craft clay nozzles by ear, a callback to Section 4's resin-coated screws, tuning each aperture until dropping water sings a desired pitch. They gently grind spout openings with microfiles, listening through stethoscopes to gauge tone precision. Mainstream historical fact: experimental archaeology has revived ancient crafts by combining traditional materials with modern acoustic analysis, producing functional replicas in museum contexts. Historians still argue whether these reconstructions can fully convey lived experiences, but the detailed tinkering reveals a deep respect for original artisans. You exit through a minimalist garden of basalt slabs and shallow reflecting pools, where a horizontal array of small fountains plays a continuous evolving composition, water jets choreographed like notes on a staff. The sound is a gentle ambient track of clicks, drip slides and slides, a modern homage to Persia's water music. As you walk, each step triggers slight changes in flow rates via pressure-sensitive valves embedded beneath hatch covers. Fringe practice: some interactive installations allow visitors to play water instruments, touchpads, regulating jets like digital thermins. You probably won't survive turning your patio into water therein, so let this futuristic fantasia remain in crafted gardens. Carry with you the vision of ancient echoes, reborn channels, cutting through contemporary landscapes, soundscapes, bridging centuries, and water's eternal song flowing onward in new forms. Next, we'll drift into final reflections on how these fountains whisper memories of past and future alike. You stand in the hush before dawn. The garden's fountains paused in suspended anticipation, their channels waiting for first light to coax water into song once more. Silhouettes of marble basins and gleaming spouts emerge in the pale glow as you inhale the night's cool breath. You probably won't survive capturing this moment with words alone. But let's drift through these whispering reflections together. Throughout your journey, you've traced water from hidden springs. Section 1, through qanat tunnels. Section 2, witnessed pool layouts, choreographing drips. Section 3, explored pump mechanics. Section 4, heard material voices. Section 5, felt ripple reveries. Section 6 resonated with archway echoes. Section 7, an uncovered symbolic depth. Section 8, you've seen caretakers' rituals. Section 9, seasonal transformations. Section 10, nighttime illuminations. Section 11, royal fountain rivalries. Section 12, nature's accompaniments of birds and chimes. Section 13, and modern revivals using digital and analog alchemy. Section 14. Now all those threads converge in a final symphony of memory. Mainstream historical fact across centuries from Achaemenid pleasure gardens to Safavid palaces. Persian fountains served as social, spiritual, and sensory centers, reflecting a culture that elevated water's sound to art. Historians still argue whether perfume channels or patterned mosaics were equally vital to garden design, but water's melody reigned supreme. A fringe tidbit trickles back. Palace poets claimed that when the final fountain runs silent at night, the garden itself breathes its dream of water echoing in the moonlit air. You probably won't survive hearing the garden exhale in your sleep, but imagine that gentle sigh. Joke 1, if gardens could nod off, they'd drift to sleep on a water lullaby. You recall the I once vaulted hum, Section 7, blending with leaf rustles. Section 8, the daily blessing ritual's whispered friend to the channels. Section 9, and the seasonal shift from torrent to hush. Section 10. At each step, structure and spontaneity danced. Engineered flow met falling leaf tuned. Drip met random bird call. Water wasn't merely directed, it was invited to collaborate. Mainstream historical fact. Persian garden treatises emphasize balance, combining symmetry with natural variation to create spaces both orderly and alive. Historians still argue whether gardens were chiefly practical oases or poetic landscapes, but their dual function endures. Joke 2. If calendars could swim, they'd schedule their laps in these pools. In modern revivals, engineers and artists fuse ancient precision with contemporary creativity. Microphones capture drip echoes. AR conjures banished prisms of light and interactive valves. Let visitors play water-like instruments. Callback unlocked the spirit of ingenuity from Section 4's secret goat tallow resins and Section 14's AR fountains lives on. Fringe practice whispers once more. Some revivalists claim that listening to reconstructed Safavid fountain sequences can lower heart rate by 7 beats per minute, a sonic therapy no spa brochure mentions. You probably won't survive replicating palace acoustics on a subway commute. But let that myth drift like a soft wave of calm. Joke 3. If fountains could prescribe medication, they'd dispense 12 drips before bedtime. As dawn's first rosy fingers brush the marble rim, water begins to stir. A single jet breaks the silence, and then a channel's steady rush returns, followed by lattice tub's solitary drips. Sound layers awaken like choir rehearsals, faint at first, growing into the full garden chorus you've come to know. Carry this moment with you. Water's eternal song, rising anew, each day, shaped by earth and stone, sustained by human care, resonant with history's voices. Each note is a reminder that simplicity and complexity, engineering and poetry, past and future, converge in water's gentle cadence. Let the garden's final exhale drift through your mind as you prepare to rest. Close your eyes and hear water's first sigh, the gentle rustling of channels waking beneath dawn's glow. Feel the weight of history lift as each ripple becomes a soft breath, lulling worries into stillness. Imagine yourself once more beside that marble basin. Section 1 Fingertips. Grazing cool currents, heart sinking with measured drips. Recall the hidden qanats, subterranean hum. Section 2 Then ascend through vaulted A1s. Section 7 Listening as echoes refract in starlit arches. Let the memory of bronze chimes. Section 13 Leaf rustle. Serenades. Section 13 and stealthy bubble chords. Section 6 Unfurl in your mind. Like petals on water, your breath becomes the garden's breeze, carrying scented whispers of jasmine and mint blending with water's lullaby. Inhale calm, exhale tension. Each inhales draws in the devotion of caretaker's daily blessings. Section 9 and each exhale releases the hush of winter's frozen hush. Section 10 The fountains you've met, gravity-fed jets, engineered, drips, seasonal surges and digital rebirths merge into a single soft drone at the edge of perception. It's a hymn older than words, carried in every drop that arcs each ripple, that sighs each echo that lingers. Let this water song cradle your thoughts, guiding you downward into the dream's embrace. Feel the cool mist settle on your skin as if a garden spirit offers one last touch. Imagine lantern-lit pools fading into soft darkness. Section 11 The final echo dissolving like dew at sunrise. You are part of the garden now, its silent witness, its gentle conductor. Rest here in water's hush. Let memory's fountains murmur you to sleep, carrying you through midnight's quiet corridors. When you dream, listen for drips echoing in distant palaces and hidden springs. Water's melody never ends. It simply flows into sleep's gentle currents.